Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the weekly Sunday service of the North Texas Church of Freethought. It is Sunday, the 21st of November of 2021. When's the last time you visited our website or our Facebook page? Please do that. Not right now, but when you're done hearing this and participating today or watching it on YouTube. If you're not getting our weekly newsletter notice, you can enter your email address at the bottom of any page on our website so that you start getting that and find out how to join us on our Zoom events and our once monthly first Sunday in-person get-togethers in the DFW area. If you're vaccinated, please do that. If you're watching this later on YouTube, please subscribe, hit the like button, and other good buttons for us. Add your comments. And for goodness sake, as I mentioned, get vaccinated against the COVID-19 and flu as well if you're not already. And if it's been 10 months or so since you got the COVID-19 vaccine, go get a booster. It's free and could save your life. If you originally got the Pfizer, by the way, the booster is the same darn thing. If you got the Moderna, it's a half dose. Too many things about this virus are bad, even if it doesn't kill you, and some protection is better than none. So Thanksgiving is in a few more days, only just this coming Thursday, and many of us have plans to visit with family and friends, at which time, among other things, there will be Thanksgiving food. It is often turkey or ham, stuffing and or dressing, mashed potatoes, yams, cranberries, green beans, and pies. Lots of pies, apple, pecan, pumpkin, and others. One year, Kit made pear pie. Was delicious. Now, very often at these times, after sitting down to eat, but before digging in, people may engage in prayer rituals. And this appeals to supernatural forces, taking them as seriously existing outside of our imaginations. That's something that people like us who reject supernaturalism have a problem with. Specifically, most of us have a problem with participating in these rituals because it gives the appearance that we agree with the premise of supernaturalism. In fact, many of us feel imposed upon, even if unintentionally, because of believers' assumption that their supernaturalism is a good thing, certainly not unobjectionable in any way. So there are a lot of moving parts here. To begin with, there is an important and basic asymmetry between the acceptability of God belief and its absence or rejection. That asymmetry plays out in many different ways in our society and culture. And what I mean by this is that for a variety of reasons, God belief is the norm and faith is considered a virtue. Most God believers resist any movement away from this, especially government policies that perpetuate the normal status of Godism. So the In God We Trust on the money and Under God and the Pledge of Allegiance, neither of which go back to the founding of the nation, as so many Godists seem to believe, have this effect of reinforcing the Godist strand in our culture. And partly, too, it's a numbers game. We talked about this last time after the presentation. The fact that so many non-theists and God skeptics, often they consider themselves agnostics, wrongly supposing that agnosticism has really anything to do with God belief. But such people remain, as it is said, in the closet. And that's so ironic, isn't it? Given the fact that the New Testament Jesus character at Matthew 6:6 tells his followers to pray alone in their closets. You wonder how much or how often that actually happens. It's also a fact that we unbelievers are indistinguishable in appearance from even the most zealous, the most extreme, and the most hateful and bigoted Godists. So we can just go along to get along if we choose to do so. No one can see our doubts about or outright rejection of supernaturalism, nor is there any atheist accent or any atheist common names. Atheists can be Jack and Jill, or they can be Mohammed and Khadija. They could be Pedro and Maria, or William and Elizabeth. And they could be Sven and some other Swedish name. Now, all this gets a bit more complicated among family and friends who may or may not know that their loved ones are not on the same page with them when it comes to basic religious opinions. And of course, there can be all sorts of reasons for this. For some of us, it is like having a secret identity that we would rather not be widely known to protect ourselves and our loved ones. We have even heard of Bible preachers who became atheists, but in some circumstances still find themselves called upon to lead a prayer or give a sermon by those that they didn't really decide to come out to. So what to do? What to do? Perhaps the biggest consideration is how we unbelievers feel about God beliefs generally and the specific beliefs that others may hold, as well as how we feel about believers and especially the specific believers that we're with. In the context of family gatherings, of course, these are people that we love and care about. These are people whom we want to know that we love and care about them. Presumably, also, they love and care about us and want us to know that they love and care about us. But that's not necessarily the case. Sadly, very sadly for many of us, we are all too well aware that some believers love their beliefs more than they love other people, even their family members, and of course, that accounts for so many unbelievers being in the closet. Sometimes that is justified by this Bible passage from Luke 14:26. Why don't we put that up when they put John 3:16? If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. As before, that's the Jesus character himself talking. That's a direct quote. And although this is a passage that is sometimes cited by atheists as being not a nice part of the Bible, especially in the New Testament, because so many believers think the New Testament's perfectly fine, even though the Old Testament's a bit barbaric in places. I mean, think of what this kind of idea spreads in our society. It really spreads and reinforces this idea that if somebody doesn't share your beliefs, why, those beliefs are more important than they are. We are put in a similar situation if, and this is often the case, we are expected to respect beliefs that we do not respect as a condition of maintaining good relationships with our family members and friends. That goes to that Bible quote I just showed. I would never say that we have to love our ideas more than actual living, breathing people, especially the people who raised us, grew up with us, helped shape who we are. For if we are to honor who we are, we must honor whatever that means to you, those who care for us and whom we care about. Then again, those who care about us should care about who we are and the importance that we attach to our beliefs and our disbeliefs, just as they do. Difficulty comes in when believers expect us to respect beliefs that we do not respect. Some may expect us to participate in their rituals to a greater or lesser extent, and then it becomes a question of to what degree we're willing to, as they say, go along to get along. Obviously, in the context of holiday get-togethers, as opposed to, say, city council meetings, we can participate to whatever extent will satisfy our believer family and friends. That, of course, says something about us and even more about our family and friends who may not always appreciate how it impacts us. They may think nothing of our being made to pretend, or they may consider that our pretending shows that we're not all that serious about our stated rationalist and naturalist outlook. That is, they may suspect that we are either not that committed or not that sincere. It might embolden them to try to proselytize us. Maybe. And there are further implications of that for us and for others, for them. I have barely touched on all the issues involved or potentially involved. We could write some books about this. We had a nice discussion about it last week, which is why I thought it would be a great subject for today with Thanksgiving only a few days away. There are many issues that will be very specific to the circumstances, the personalities, the motivations, and even the venue where it's taking place and who's hosting and so forth, who brought the food. It may even be the case that going along to get along can be done in a way that steers things away from, or at least places into doubt, the most toxic religious ideological ideas and attitudes. So I'm not going to tell you what to do. There are no orthodox atheist rules about this. What I will do is ask you to think. We always ask you to think. Remember that we must always be in the business of mind reading, as it were. As we interact with others, we simulate their minds in our own mind. We do this on the fly, almost unconsciously many times, before, during, and after we interact with them, in assessing our actions, our words, and our feelings. Now, this is not something we're born with. Like languages, we're born with the hard wiring to learn languages, to learn this ability to simulate other people's minds. And maybe like languages, it gets harder to learn new and better ways of doing it as we grow older, but we must make the effort. Recently, I viewed some materials in connection with my medical board recertification. Examining unconscious bias was the title of one part of it, but it turned out not to be an excuse or exercise for woke self-berating. In fact, the unconscious part was not about some magical internal hatred of oppressed people on the part of members of an oppressor group that can't be fixed and can only be addressed by demonstrations in the streets to force government restructuring of our entire society and all of its institutions. In fact, what was recommended in these materials were things I've been doing already. They were things I've often talked about with you here and elsewhere over the years, but I did learn this very useful way of organizing and thinking about this, and here it is. PAUSE is an acronym for a sequence of steps. The P is for paying attention to our emotional response to people and in situations where we're interacting with others, or maybe even just reading a book. Maybe emotional is too strong a word, since it includes all non-rational responses that pop into our heads, often unbidden and often uncomfortable, the things that come from the gut instead of from our thoughtful assessment. They're usually things that clash with facts and reason or rub us the wrong way. Looked at from the vantage of facts and reason, they may be not just non-rational, but irrational. They may be rather stupid, in fact. They're often unwelcome and they interrupt our ability to think. No wonder, as was mentioned last week, our ancestors thought emotional reactions are incited in us by supernatural beings trying to influence us. I said at the time, to think of the passages in Homer's Iliad where gods are flitting about putting emotions into people. Or think of the Old Testament God who hardened the heart of Pharaoh at Exodus 9:12. The problem for us is that our dislike for these feelings can cause us to attach them to others instead of looking at what they really are and where they really come from. So after the P in pause, we should acknowledge, recognize, and accept what we are feeling. Okay, so it's a part of us. It doesn't mean we own it in the sense of being something that we can't think about and deal with and maybe eventually overcome. But what we are feeling does not come about magically. Rather, there almost certainly are pre-existing assumptions and experiences that underlie what we are feeling. The U is for understanding, to seek to assess and make sense of where we're coming from. That is, of course, a part of who we ourselves are, but we are human beings that can always and should always grow and improve and learn, and so these are occasions to do just that. Indeed, it is the essence of what our church preaches is real religion, making sense of the subjective side of the human condition. And this includes those aspects of it that make us uncomfortable, maybe even especially those aspects of it that make us uncomfortable. So that brings us to the S. That's for seeking other perspectives. This means remembering that our perspective is just that, our perspective. We don't need to go read, interact with people and say, oh, wait a minute, I need to go read a book, I need to, talk to a bunch of people. But we need to realize there are other perspectives, and that means questioning what we thought we knew and even especially questioning what everybody knows, quote unquote. It means exploring alternative ways of looking at things. There are always other perspectives, and we're smart enough to try to think of those. Finally, the E is for examining one's options and choosing among them. Hopefully, we choose the best one, but everything we say and do has a tentative character. And there's always next time. We will make mistakes in how we interact with people and how we decide to act, and that's how we learn, as we say so often. But there can be more to it, and how much more there is to it depends on many things, not the least of which are the personal feelings of the unbeliever that we may be interacting with. And bringing us back to the problem of dealing with family and friends, or bosses and coworkers, and others who want us to bow our heads, or listen to the praying, or even pray with them. What are our options? We can refuse to participate, of course, or even vocally object, or we can act like we're one of them, just go along to get along. In either case, we must bear the consequences. But in between these options are many other possibilities depending on all the circumstances that I referred to earlier. If it's our house and our table, of course, we can just not do the ritual or suggest that anyone who wants to pray silently can do so. If it's somebody else's house, maybe you know what's going to happen. Somebody is going to give an invocation, or somebody is going to be in charge and call for the prayer. You might want to take them aside and discuss other possibilities or your feelings about it. You have to make your own judgments based on that PAUSE acronym I showed you. But at any rate, I took the liberty of just thinking about it a while and thought of a non-goddess invocation. Suppose it's at your house and these are people who normally pray. What you might say is, regardless of what I or anyone else thinks of prayer, I think it's a fine thing to talk to ourselves and to and with each other. That is what we're here to do, after all. As we begin our feasting, we should have in mind the love and the good feelings we have for each other. We should take the time to fully appreciate and enjoy what we have in each other. In the culinary delicacies we are about to enjoy, and here you would put in plus Aunt Mary's special pie or dressing or something like that, and the many other material benefits of our living at this time and in this place, and the gratitude we owe towards all those others who have made it all possible. So you get the idea, I'm sure. You notice the gratitude word too, I trust. This is important because with this first holiday this coming Thursday, we often hear, how can atheists be grateful? Who are they grateful to? And of course, there are plenty of real people who have put forth real effort so that we do have and enjoy the things we have generally as a society and personally in our lives. This church is such an effort to tilt the culture and our ideas and attitudes in a better direction, everybody's ideas and attitudes. Not trying to change minds, but let's have more understanding. Because we're all fine with people who have different ideas and attitudes. Our goal is not to get everybody to think and believe the same. That would be terrible if that happened. Rather, the goal is to increase understanding, or as is said these days, to raise awareness. If anybody has any comments, wants to augment or disagree, now's the time. Otherwise, we'll get to discussion afterwards. So November 21st, it turns out a lot of interesting things happened. 164 BCE, Judas Maccabeus, a leader of the Jewish Hasmonean family, restored the temple in Jerusalem. So there is that name, Judas, which most people know as the apostle that betrayed Jesus in the New Testament. And I wonder if it is entirely coincidental that this guy who reestablished the Jerusalem temple had the same name, or whether maybe when the temple was restored, there were Jews who had gotten kind of used to it not being there, and maybe they objected and said, maybe it's not such a good idea to reestablish this religious power structure, both physical and the rabbi ecclesiastical organization. And remember, within a few generations, the temple would be destroyed again. Jesus even called for it to be destroyed, never to be rebuilt, and it was subsequently replaced in some sense by Christian theology. There is, of course, a Gnostic Gospel of Judas that paints that apostle as the only one that knew what Jesus was really about, and whose betrayal actually furthered the divine plan. And Judas has been elsewhere cast as a hero, including the 1988 film The Last Temptation of Christ. Oh boy, I remember the believers picketing and being all upset by that. By contrast, Benedict Arnold, for example, he's never, ever thought of as an American hero, even though he did do a lot of heroic things before he went over to the British. Secondly, in 1620, this was the day that the Plymouth settlers signed the Mayflower Compact. That was the first governing document of the new Plymouth colony in what would become Massachusetts. That document was signed aboard ship as it lay at anchor in Provincetown Harbor. 1676, the Danish astronomer Ole Romer presented the first measurements of the speed of light. That was based on his observations of the motions of the Jovian moons, the moons of Jupiter. And in 1877, on this date, Thomas Edison announced his invention of the phonograph. You say that so you hear it. Phonograph, the record player. It was the beginning of auditory history. Just think, before that, we did not know what the voices of historic people sounded like. After that, that's when we started getting that. 1953, on this date, the Natural History Museum in London announced that Piltdown Man, at the time claimed to be a missing link, and this was 41 years after its discovery. It was announced that that was a hoax. Brilliant and wonderful example of how science is self-correcting. Bunches of other interesting things happened on today's day, November 21st, but that's all for now, folks. The smallest minority, as I said last time too, is an individual. And the most important diversity is that of different ideas shaped by a diversity of backgrounds and experiences. When we interact with others, let us not be like the supernaturalist religious zealots who are only happy if they can get others to agree with them. Otherwise, they have to hate you, remember? Let us strive for and be satisfied with understanding and being understood. And that is a huge difference. Keep this in mind. We can discover that there are lots of ways to interact with civility. If someone says something that rubs you the wrong way, remember we talked about that PAUSE acronym. something strikes you as wrong, you have an emotional reaction, it's fine to say so. I just, don't agree with that. I'll have to think about maybe why. But it may even be better to just think it over, figure out why it affected you that way, whether it was intended as you took it, and if it's really wrong, why, and in what way it's wrong, and even what kernel of truth it may contain that makes it appeal to otherwise well-intentioned people. Always, always, always let us not believe too much or too strongly. It is enough to know of many things without becoming very attached to any of them. Remember, we are embodied minds. We are minds and bodies, and this means we should pay attention to our physical state, being aware of our tone of voice, rising feelings of anxiety, and so forth. Remember the pause again, pay attention. We often don't react in the moment the way that we later, when we have the time and opportunity to think about things, the way that we would have liked. So sometimes it is best just to take a deep breath and let things go. There'll always be another opportunity, especially with your friends, and you're with your friends now, of course. This is the way of free thinkers. Our principles, briefly: reason, enjoyment, appreciation, and love. These capsulize what we're about, although it could be put in many different ways. This is kind of what we settled on most recently. It used to be a more lengthy, wordy version, and we had another version before that. So our religion is more like science. We feel free to amend it, make it better, change it, simplify it, whatever appeals to us at the time. We are learning and growing people. We ask not just for your moral support and participation in the discussion of ideas important to us, but also for your financial support. Let us know what else you would like to see us do and be prepared to help us accomplish that. Please visit us on Facebook and Twitter. As I said at the beginning, we're not very active there, but they are outposts of our facts and reason-based outlook. They are important ways for us to increase and improve the impact of free thought. It is, after all, your values that are at stake. If you are truly committed to those values, if you believe they are important, Charles Sanders Peirce, the American philosopher, once defined belief as a disposition to act. His idea was that how can you really say you believe in something if it doesn't somehow influence your actions? We find fault with others who do not act in support of the values they say they hold, so let us act in support of our values, because we can do so much more together, things that we cannot do ourselves. We're so lucky to have each other in this church. Let us make the most of it by promoting facts and reason and celebrating doubt. And as Gandhi put it, be the future that you wish to see. Thank you and good morning. And I put this up last time for the first time. This is the second time now. Melius facet. It means, in Latin, do better. Strikes me as a great slogan for freethinkers, and in a way, it's all we ever really talk about, isn't it? And with that, for those of us in today's video conference, we'll go to discussion, and I'll stop sharing the screen. But again, please go to our Facebook page and especially our website and learn more about us. Join us again. Thank you.